But welcome to today's webinar. We're going to talk about building a React application using Syncfusion controls. It's going to be a fairly simple application, but you're going to get the idea of how that works. I am Chad Church. I will be your presenter for today's webinar. And today we're talking about React. Now this webinar is not a how to make a React application. There will be a little bit of that, but that's not the focus. And there's a ton of people who would love to come and sit with you and teach you all about React and all about anything you want to pay them to teach you about. But I'm not one of those people, and this is not the intention of this. We're going to make a simple React app, and we're going to show how our controls can be used in that application. And so I'm going to get started now. I like using a little command prompt here. I like using a command prompt, and I'm going to create a new app. It's going to be a React app. Call it my app. Am I going to call it my app? I think that's what I'm going to call it. I am going to call it my app, and I'm going to use scripts. I want to use the version of these scripts is going to be React, and I'm going to use TypeScript. Now, as I do this, if anybody's going to follow along, if you want to use TypeScript in your React app, make sure you spell this exactly correct. If you don't, then the Create React app is going to ignore it and give you the vanilla JavaScript application, the JSX files. But here I'm going to TS was recognized as being used, so fantastic. And let's go back to the lovely PowerPoint slides. Our controls do support all the cool stuff. You can use JSX controls format with our controls. There's no worries there. I just like the TypeScript. We do support the tree shaking. You can use it with ES6. We can controls will go if you like. These controls were built in TypeScript. We took our JavaScript library was built way back when, 5 or 6 years ago, and we're rebuilding that whole suite. We're rebuilding it in TypeScript. We thought TypeScript was a great way to do it. It gave us a ton of flexibility. TypeScript can be transpiled and versus compiled. It's transpiled, I guess, and to a variety of JavaScript flavors. And we've taken that, and for this particular sample here, what I'm showing you here, we have made those into component webinar React components for, so you can use it. And I'll show you what that is in just a minute. These are our controls that we currently have in JavaScript 2, and these are the editors that are there. Now, what I want to do, you saw me, I just did this. I created the React app. I'm using Type. And I'm about to add the Syncfusion packages to it. So let's do that. And here we go. We have this applications here. It was successful. I'm going to go to it, my app. Boom. And let's do this. Let's just start this thing just to see how it looks. Make sure it runs. I always like to do a sanity check as I'm doing this. And I do have another port. We have a port conflict going on there. Here is the application, and it started. Look at that. It worked. Okay. Perfect. Look at that. Okay. All right. Now let's go in and let's look at what we add. Well, here's a little bit more about this. These are how we're going to add our components. These are how you'll add your components to create your application. Okay, and while we do that, let's go ahead and let's step in and let's look at our application, shall we? Let's open this with Visual Studio Code, because that's, I like to use code. Here's the application, and here is what we have, and our sources here, all these files. Now, the way React is going to work, just a kind of a high-level touch on it, React wants you to have one web page, one entry point. In this case, it's going to be the root. Now, technically, you can have as many of these divs here as you want. React wants you to have one. That's their idea. It's one. React comes from, there's a parent, there's a child, and child. As many as you like, brothers and sisters, have many of those as you wish. The data is going to come down in a prop from the parent. It's going to come down, and then the state is going to go back up. The state can go up. So you bring the data down, the data changes, then you put that state back up, and then you'll do whatever you need to do with it at that point. But this is it. This is the root is the key here. We're going to put everything into the root. And this is what we're actually going to put into root. This is a component. This is the default component that comes with React. And this is it here. This is our app component. I'm going to be creating some of these. And it gets put into the root file with this, the index.tsx. So you see app component from the app file, and then it's going to render the app component into the root, that root element that was in the HTML. That's in a nutshell how this is going to work. If you had children, then you would have the component would render a child in some fashion. But let's get started, shall we? I'm going to add, let's go ahead and open a command prompt here. And let's add Syncfusion control, so npm. And we're going to install save. Now, save is the keyword at this point. Save, the npm install is going to put our controls into the folder directory. The save is going to tell this project here that it's there and to go ahead and load it up. Let's add our grids, Syncfusion, EJ2 React grids. And there we go. So this is installed here. And I'm going to do this for the grid, the chart, the schedule, the linear gauge, and our data manager. Data manager is something that we're going to use for this as well. So let's let this run for a minute. And while it's going, the grid control actually uses, so there's a lot of controls that if you kind of, if any of you can actually read those things that go by there. You'll see, I'll show you in just a minute what actually got in. Now let's put our charts in. Okay, so what actually happened? Let's go over here. This is my app. So here's my app. And here's what actually got installed. It went installed into the node modules. That's where everything got put. And here is the Syncfusion. The staging is the chart that was being staged. But this is what actually got put in. Here's our charts, here's our grids. And these controls require all these little things here. So they require the count buttons, the inputs, the lists. You know, if you need the grid to do any data updating, if it's a date field, you're going to need a calendar. If it's a reference to another table, then you're going to need a drop down. And that's what comes with it. So that's how we put all this together. And let's add our schedule. Okay. And then the linear gauge, and then we're going to add our data components. So as I build this, as I'm adding these components, I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to start with a very simple data object, just a little collection of data there in the component, just to show it on the screen. Then I'm going to use a separate data file. So some other little TSX that's going to have some collection of data, and I'm going to bind to that. Then I'm going to bind to a actual web API. And I have a separate project that is the web API. And I'm going to show you that when the time comes. I'll get that up, I'll get that running, and then we'll bind to that web API and we'll return data for that. So that's kind of options on how you're actually going to bind data, because in real life, nothing's ever simple. So linear gauge, so I have grid, chart, schedule, gauge. Let's go ahead and add our data. Okay, and then we're going to be done adding all this. And we'll get to actually creating a Syncfusion component. And that'll be a lovely thing to see. So actually, while this starts, let's go ahead now. Let's go ahead and add a new file. A new file is going to be our chart component. Now, a couple of things. As we are going through this, something called lint is here. Lint is a very cool thing and it works great, but I do not want to worry with it, so I'm disabling lint. Lint is a way to make you write code in a particular fashion. So it's going to keep your code style up to date. All right. Now to get this going, a couple things we need to do. And I'm going to try not to type a whole lot because I have not yet figured out how to type and talk and present at the same time, or at least not well. But I'm going to do just a little bit just to kind of show you how it works. So here's import. So the error message I'm getting here is that I've created this, but I've not used it. Okay. So let's create here. Let's create an export. Let's actually make this do something. Export default class, and we're going to call this chart. And this is going to the chart extends the React component. The React component class takes two variables, two objects. And the first one is your prop, the second one is your state. So here we go. We have a syntactically correct component here. It doesn't do anything at all. There's no syntactical errors to it. Okay, so fantastic. So far, so good. Now we actually want to do something. So I'm going to import a collection of things actually from the Syncfusion chart. So add Syncfusion charts. And we call it charts because we actually have two charts in there. And I'll just kind of step into that real quick as I'm going along. Here's the charts. So here is our React charts. We have the accumulation and the regular charts. The accumulation is your pie, your funnel, those things. And then the regular chart is all the cool stuff, the lines, the bars, the columns, all that stuff is in our regular charts. And that's that. Okay. So React charts. And what are we going to add from this? We are going to create, so we have modularized our components. So we have the chart, that's the first thing you need. That's the container. Chart component is what has the concept of what a chart does and how it can work, and it goes that way. Then we have our series. Series directive, this is going to create a series and define what a series is. In this case, I'm going to use a column series. So we have a column series. And I want to show a legend. And I need a series collection. So you can have as many series as you like in this series collection direct. This is going to define what the actual series, the collection of series for that chart. And again, you can have as many as you want. Our data is not going to be numeric. My X values are going to be letters, strings, so I need a category. And I need a tooltip. I like a tooltip. Tooltips are fun. So there we go. We have everything in here. And again, to get symbol errors, have a lot of declarations that I'm not using at all at the moment. So let's come in and let's get started here. I'm going to export default. You have to render something. Yes. We have to render something, and that something is going to be like this. So here we're rendering something. That is not what I wanted to do. Okay. And we're going to render something. Let's render. Okay. Okay. And we got to return. And we're going to return a div. And I do like to close my things as I'm going. It makes me happy. Yes, you can blame the first instructor I had in C# for making me want to do this. Now here I'm going to add a chart component. Chart component, and the chart component is going to contain a couple of things. A couple of things like this. We're going to give it an ID value just so I control what that is. So there we go. So ID value. Primary x-axis is going to be the value type category, because again, when I put this in, there's not numbers for it. It's just going to be strings. Okay. And I need to close my chart component. Okay. Now we have the chart component. The chart component is here. Very cool. but it doesn't do anything yet. It doesn't know about anything yet. So into that chart, we're going to inject our stuff. So we're going to inject our services into this chart. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Okay. All right. And we're going to inject services. And the services are going to be a column series and category and legend, not the legend renderer, that kind of comes with the legend, and our tooltip. Okay, so there we go, that's our injector. And then let's add our series. So we have a series directive here. Okay, so a series, and I don't have any data yet. So you see, this is why I like to close things off right away, because if you don't, you forget about it, or I do anyway. All right, let's okay. So let's talk about adding this data set. So I need a simple set of data. I just want to do something small. It's fairly trivial. There we go. So here we have data one. Data one is just going to be a collection of string values and then some numeric values. And then in our chart here, we're setting our data source. Now each series can have its own data source. So if I want to add another data series, I'm going to have a separate data source for that series. It does work best when the primary axis values match up, or at least the range of values match up. And go from there. Okay. Let's see it here. Here we go. So now let's put this into our index file. So I want to use the chart now, the chart object. And the chart object is in our chart file. And then, so I have imported it. Now let's add it. Let's use the chart here. Okay. Okay, so boom, it's here. It's in, and let's see what happens. Let's see if this works. And it's starting. So let's get this up and running, and let's go find my browser. And here we go. So this is my app. And look at that. So what did I miss? I missed something. My index is here. I've added it, and here's my app. Create. Chart render, root is element. Okay. Yeah, so sure. All right. And there we go. We have an app up and running. We don't have it running quite right. So let's see. Import as React. Here we go. Chart from chart. Let's actually save this, shall we? And there we go. So saving is critical, by the way, as you go through all this. Here's our chart. So this is a tooltip. It shows up. And a chart is defined. Here is our legend and the tooltip and all that. So beautiful, fantastic. We have a chart, and that was simple. So why does develop so long? This took me what, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that. All right, let's come back and let's do some more. Let's now add a grid control. Okay, and the grid control, I'm going to do this a little bit easier. I'm actually going to talk about what we did. So here we have the grid control, and now data source. Let's get rid of this for now. No, I'm going to go ahead and use it. So data source. Let's add a data source file. Okay. And the data source file is going to be this guy here. So it's a fairly good sized data source. And I do want to make sure lint doesn't worry me about this again. Okay, so it's a good sized data source. Data source file is now here. Let's save everything. And let's go back to our grid. So we have the data source defined. No more errors. The grid is going to use that data source. So this is a separate file that we have here. That's another way of doing your data binding. We're going to allow sorting. If I wanted to allow anything else, I would add it here. But let's get this going now. Let's come into our TX and let's make a change. Show our grid control here instead of the chart. Okay, so perfect. And let's save it all. And we save it, it's going to compile. So once you get npm start going, it sits and spins. And then as you make changes, you save changes, it realizes changes were saved, and it shows up here. So this is our grid. Now, some purpose, believe it or not, but this is our grid control. Here's the core grid control, but it's missing the styles. This is kind of blah. This is really, really blah, actually. So let's come back and let's add our styles. And I'm going to add the styles here in my app CS just because I can. And I'm actually going to add up, so I'm going to pull in the CSS from our controls that we. So here we go. So we're going to pull in the material theme. I like the material theme. I think it makes me happy. It's pretty, it's clean, it's simple. And let's save all this. And something very important I usually forget is I need to tell it to import the app CSS. If you don't tell it to do it, it won't do it. Code does not yet read our minds. I'm sure somebody's working on that. Let's go else. See, this is your TS lint. It's a lovely thing, but for the purposes of this application, it is overkill. So let's come in. Here is an app now, and if we go look at our application, it has a theme to it. It looks pretty. And this is how you expect a grid to look and function. So there we go. So again, that easy. Not a whole lot of work going on with that. At my level, not a whole lot of work. Okay. So perfect, perfect. Now, that's a grid control. So what about a schedule? Let's add a schedule to this. And with the schedule, we're going to add a couple more things to this. Okay, here's our schedule. And I schedule control right over here that I can put in. So let's talk about this for a minute. Here's the schedule control. React from React. We're pulling in from our data manager, and our URL adapter. The URL is going to let you go talk to some URL. That's what it does. And these are just JavaScript widgets. That's all they are. So there's no, we didn't feel the need to rebuild these in TypeScript because they were already JavaScript. But then when import from our schedule, we need a component, just like the chart component, you got to have a framework to actually show a schedule. And then into that framework, we're adding these particular modules. Now, we need to have a schedule here, but we're going to have our data. The data is going to come from some web API. This is the API. I'm going to open that project in just a minute, but you can see the adapter is going to be a URL adapter because that's what we're going to talk to. Now, the schedule needs, these fields are required for any of your data sets. You can add as many more fields as you like, but you got to have these so that we can understand what that is and where to put it and how to draw it on the screen and all that good stuff. But let's go ahead and let's look at our, so this is the web API that we have. We have one for schedule. We actually have one for the grid that I don't think I'm going to show here today, but you can, this project will be available to you wherever this video ends up. This project will be close to it. So you can have both this and the React project. They'll be together. You can pull them down. You can run them yourself, or you can change them and talk to your own web API. But here's the idea. Our data manager gives you the idea of editing. Yeah, so you can insert, update, and remove. These are all built into the data manager. Data manager knows if you're doing a post, it'll add the parameter action to it, or it'll come to the get or the post is what it'll do. And then these parameters are added by you as you go through it. So anyway, let's get this running. There we go, beautiful. It's always great when things work. And let's get him down. And let's come back to here and let's save him. He's not going to do anything fun for us yet, but let's go into our index and let's say I want to show the schedule from the schedule file, and I want to put it here. Okay, so now everything works, everything's together. Let's recompile all this. Perfect. And we can go look at that same file. And here is our schedule control, a lovely thing. We have the schedule, we have the days, these work weeks, these are the things that we imported. This is data that came with our data set, and I was playing around with this a little bit, so we have here. Let's, now, while I'm here already, this is a editable panel, so you can create your own editor window is what this is. You can create your own, add whatever parameters, whatever fields you need to add to it. Just make sure that our control gets back those fields that we require. Okay, and I've been adding controls to it, so I've been playing around here. If you want to add one, you can add Bob, for example. Bob is now a field here. And it gets saved. So these are ones as I've been playing around, I've added some appointments here. So you can see that it actually does the updating and all that. All right, so there we go. There's schedule. And it's talking to some web API. Perfect. Beautiful. Now let's go and talk about a linear gauge. I'm going to make it to the linear gauge portion today. I must be talking really, really fast. Let's go look at this. Okay, here we go, and I'm on a new file. We're going to call this a gauge. It's not a gauge.ts. No, that's not what it is. There we go. Now that's what it is. And let's go look at this. Okay. So this one is a little bit more. So we have here, same thing, we're still importing React, and I don't actually need to import this. We're still importing from React. Linear gauge components are here. We're importing this data. I'm not going to use it, but it's still kind of left over. The data manager. Now here, we're actually adding a query to it. I'm going to use Web API adapter instead of the URL adapter. Using a query here. The query is going to let you actually do some questions. So if you need to query your data sets, you can define that here. You can create your query, run it in the data manager. We'll run this query. And then you can get back the data set. So this is going to run. Okay, when the query come back. And then the gauge component is here, and the gauge component is going to bind to whatever, show whatever's defined here as you go through this. Okay. So that's how this is all set. And you can come back, again, you're going to have this project. You can download it, have a play, see how things work together, do all that. Walk through, build it yourself if you like. And let's come in here. So this is, my component is a gauge control. So let's come in here to our index, and let's add the gauge to this. and we're going to add the gauge here, and we are going to add the gauge here. Perfect. So it works, and I'm going to save it. And it's going to compile for us. And then let's go look at the sample. Let's go look at the project here. So here's our gauge control. Simple. Really, there's nothing to this. There's not a whole lot to the gauge anyway. It's just it's a linear gauge, so it's your thermometer. Is kind of the idea behind it. So that is our control. So this is a quick run through. I'm going to stop this. This is a quick run through of building a action with React using Syncfusion components. Components are here. This is how you can use them as you go through building things. Now, we do have a ton of these components. They live here. Let's take a quick look at these. Let's go through. Here's the components. And what I've been looking at these. The developer platform is here, the pure JavaScript, the React. That's where I've been. So these are all the controls that we have. It was all built for React, built to be modular, touch-friendly, globalization. All that was here built for it. Now the idea is these controls are going to, so we have JavaScript 1's been around again. These are going to all replace that JavaScript suite. If you're using the API for our TypeScript controls, we did our best to try and keep it the same. The goal was let you drag and let you just drop and keep working, but because we made it modular and the idea and the actual action of making our controls modular meant we had to compartmentalize a lot. We had to change the API a fair bit. So if you're using the JavaScript, the JS1 controls, continue using them for as long as you like. We're going to support you. We're going to support you as long. Don't worry, we will keep supporting you for that. But as you build something new, you put a new page, you put a new app, then move to the newer controls, the EJ2 controls. They're going to give you all the benefit of this. We did build them so they will work side by side with the older JavaScript controls. We made sure of that. But this is going to be a evolution. You're going to move your app to the newer controls as okay, and with that, I think I'm going to move to the Q&A session and answer any questions you guys may have. So let's see here. Let's get to that. A couple things here is, yeah, come with this. So about Syncfusion, this is about us, okay? And now, oh, one thing I did want to show, hold on a second, guys. I don't want to touch on this too much. As you download our controls, any controls you download here, there is going to be a license. This is something that does download with it. So, we are a company. We do need to be licensed, and this kind of comes with. So, license file is here. You can read this and just be aware of what that is as you're building your applications. All right, and thank you so much for attending.